Hey guys, and welcome to Tnashi's Movie Corner. We are doing a spoiler review discussing The Force Awakens. You can tell by the title. We did our spoiler-free one up, and I've had some time to really think this movie over. I haven't seen it again. I'll end up seeing it several more times, but I've had some real time to process it. And you actually gave your rating in the last one, so I'm sure you guys know where he stands on it. He's not a fan, are you?
Well, no, I can't say I can't say that I'm a fan.
The one thing I want to do is I want to make sure that we discuss the good and the bad of this movie. I don't want to just harp on it, but I don't want to be. I've seen so many reviews where people give it the equivalent of like a 10 out of 10, or a 9, or even an 8, and I can't go that high. And we're gonna get straight into why. So this movie, Episode 7, A New Hope, 2.0, right? That was the title?
Yeah, essentially 2.0.
Okay, I thought that was the title. Someone said something about Force Awakening. I was like, what? That can't be right. Anyway, yeah, this movie's A New Hope. It is. Does it have some things different? Sure. I mean, if it had been just verbatim every single sequence and not been a remake, which I think people need to understand is the difference here. If it was a remake, I would have been more on board with it, right? Because a remake, you take elements of the original, but you adjust it, you change it, right? You expand upon it. But the fact of the matter is, this had so many beats to A New Hope. Between the droid getting the information and one of our hero characters being taken prisoner, which happens between the Vader wannabe, between our main character being on a desert planet who just happens to come across the droid with the vital information that they need, that the rebellion, the resistance, needs, and then runs into another character who knows all about the Force and kind of some of the stuff's going on, and who becomes kind of like a father figure to our main character who doesn't have a father figure for some reason, right? And then of course this father figure has to die within the course of this movie. Has to actually face the villain, face the main villain we're looking at, and they know each other. Of course they know each other. They got history. They have to. And then dies as the main character can do nothing but watch, right? So you have all that going. And then of course you have the Death Star 2.0 shows up. Mind you, it's not even a focus of this movie like it was in The New Hope. So it's just there. You can cut in at any time, by the way, because I'm just going to keep going.
And of course, this is like, they even make a reference in this movie. It's like, oh, it's just another Death Star. It's like, no, this one's bigger than the other one.
We've rebuilt it. Bigger.
And more
stronger,
powerful than ever.
More powerful than before. Yeah. Yeah. And to be fair, it has some differences to it. But come on, guys. I don't want to watch A New Hope, Empire, Return of the Jedi, and then this movie and be like, wait, am I watching A New Hope again? What's happening?
Did I loop back in time?
Yeah, did I go back? And people were like, oh, well, they had to go and pull from stuff to make the fans happy. Look, you can give me an original story, progressing stuff forward, still have callbacks, because I'm not saying all the callbacks were bad. There's a really good callback with C-3PO where he interrupts Han and Leia's conversation, right?
Yeah.
And he makes a point of saying to Han, you probably don't recognize me because of my arm. That stuff is funny. Having the chest kind of set them with the monsters on the Falcon. That's funny. That's good. I like that. But don't give me the same damn plot. And I don't understand why people are like, yeah, we'll let it pass. No. No. This is probably the biggest mark against this movie. For me, anyway. Because when you recycle stuff like that, when you have no originality, and you're supposed to come in here and present us with something new to expand upon this universe, and you don't really expand like you can. Because you go back and pull from the well. Because you're like, oh, well, that worked.
And that's part of my thing about this movie is I felt like they spent too much time trying to remind you of what you liked in the original trilogy, and not in the sense it's like, well, it's the same kind of feeling or whatever that you got from watching those movies, but it's like a different story. It's not like that at all. They pretty much had so much that was kind of copy pasted from that trilogy and inserted in this one, that it felt like the movie really kind of lacked that real sense of originality, because I felt like there was way too many callbacks. And I felt like
I agree. There's too
between
many.
those and the fact that the plot is so vastly recycled from episode 4, I was really put off by that, because it's like, well, we need, because even when you had the Death Star show back up in 6 had stuff that made it different from 4. It had similarities, it had some differences, but it didn't feel like you were watching the exact same movie.
Right.
But this one's like, well, we're gonna have some things that are different, but we're gonna just keep being like, huh? Remember this from this movie? Remember this? And
right. That's my thing old, too. Was like, I do like some of the callbacks, so I don't want to say, oh, I don't like any of them, because I do like some of them, but they did overdo it. But mostly, it's the plot. It's reusing the plot. And they said something about the guy that wrote Empire Strikes Back being on board here writing the screenplay for it. And J.J. Abrams contributed to that. And I was like, no, all you did was been like, you know what? We like this in the first one. And we like the first one a lot. So we're just going to cut, copy, cut, paste that right here. Okay? And people are going to love it, because people that didn't like the prequels are just going to be like, well, it ain't the prequel, so it must be awesome. And unfortunately, that's exactly the sentiment I think a lot of people had, was, well, it's not the prequels. And see, I'm a fan of all Star Wars. I'm not a fan of just, the original trilogy. I'm a fan of all of it. So for me to see this, and plus, I love story. I'm such a huge fan of story. To see them do this pissed me off to the point where we got out of this movie, and I had a rant, and I couldn't rate it in the last one because it ticked me off so bad that I had to really think about my rating. And that's when you know that you don't have a great movie. That's when you know that a movie it doesn't fall up there with Empire Strikes Back, or even, Revenge of the Sith for me. When I have to come out of this movie and been like, I got to think just how much I don't like this stuff. Not how much I like the other stuff, but how much I don't like this stuff, because it's really bugging me. And it brought this score for me down so far. But I want to move on from that, actually, because we spent a lot of time there.
Actually, I do want to address that a little bit more, because it does tie into some of our character things that we.
Yeah, I want to bring that up when we bring up the character things. So, but I want to go straight into characters, because I love the characters. I didn't love everything involved with them. So I love Rey. Rey's actually a great character. I think great performances all around, minus Carrie Fisher, I think. But I had a huge problem with Rey, and this will go into the plot and with her character and what happens with her character, and you know what I'm talking about. So you go ahead and mention it.
The thing is that, and we've heard, like, she's referred to as a Mary Sue. A character that just kind of has all this stuff that just kind of gets handed to her.
Right, I didn't know
And-
that term.
Yeah, I didn't either. And then I heard it, and I heard it explained, and it actually fits really well. Because the thing is,
What's
for the
a Mary
parts
Sue?
when she's a Mary Sue is just, well, actually, didn't I just say it? It's a character that kind of that doesn't really have to like struggle with the stuff. The character just kind of has all this stuff, given to them, and they just kind of overcome anything that comes their way like super easy.
Nothing challenges them.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, prior to certain moments, yeah, she made sense. She's just somebody that's, she's salvaging from this thing. She's trying to get by. She's obviously underpaid for all this crap, and then she finds this droid and she's like, okay, I know why don't you go that direction? You can find what city, you can find, what you're looking for and be on your way. And then she's like, well, why are you following? A lot of those interactions that she has actually feels really legit for her character. Even when, like, she's being offered a bunch of those rations for the droid, and, she's really tempted to take.
Skip ahead.
Yeah. The problem is, though, is like when she's suddenly able to pilot something, she doesn't even know the controls hardly for her, or she shouldn't. And then she, like, pulls off all these stunts, or when she's, like, being able to use force powers without even trying to practice this at all.
The flying the Falcon thing didn't bother me except for that one move that she did, where she pulls it around so that Finn can then use the gun, which was stuck, right? That's the one scene where I'm like, okay, well, that's just not good. Because if you go by a logic of, well, she has the Force and Anakin and, being able to pilot the I'm going blank. Not the speeders, the
pod racers.
Yeah, pod racing. Then it makes a little sense that her reactions would be kind of heightened. But the fact that she's able to do a technique like that doesn't work. And then she's able to tap into the Force and use the mind control without waving her hand at all, which is I thought was always supposed to channel it. But regardless, we always see Jedi doing that, and she doesn't do it. It just happens, and somehow she just knows how to do it. And then later on, she's fighting Ben. Yeah, Ben Solo. And she gets the lightsaber. She looks like she's being beaten. But then she calms and collects herself. And all of a sudden, she whoops his ass. And people were like, oh, well, he was hurt. So?
He actually would have had sword training.
Yeah, that's the thing, too. Like, he should have had plenty of training. And this is where the backstory doesn't make any sense to me. Because it's like, he should have been trained by Luke. He should have been trained a bit by Snoke. He should have known what the hell he was doing. She's never used a lightsaber before. And we're supposed to buy...
Never used the Force before.
We're supposed to buy that a character can do that? Luke couldn't even do that. Anakin, we can assume, couldn't even do that. Because he didn't do it. He just didn't show up in Phantom Menace and be like, oh, well, lightsaber, boom. It didn't happen. And then go with Finn's character, which actually, little tidbit, his identification number is the number of the cell that Leia was being held in A New Hope.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's a cool callback because it's there, but it's not obviously there.
Yeah.
So that works. Anyway, but you have Finn. He's a stormtrooper who, becomes kind of overwhelmed with everything, decides that this isn't what he wants. This isn't the right path. And he turns and he tries to run away and he ends up joining the Resistance or what have you, which on paper sounds good. But in practice, we don't get any particular reason why he should have turned, why he should have had that change. Because we are told that he's taken from birth, pretty much, as a child. He's taken into this program and trained to do this stuff. And then for some reason, he gets blood on his helmet and he freaks out, and that's kind of the end of it. And it's like, well, who's the guy that died? They have to be connected somehow, right? So he has to care about that guy. But then minutes later, he's in the TIE fighter shooting at the very people that he was just working with. And it's like, oh, well, he couldn't have been connected that bad to him.
Yeah, he did portray them like super easy on all this stuff. And you would have figured that if you're trained for that long, that you would actually be a little bit more used to the idea that you might actually have to hurt somebody.
Right.
You know, and then later on they mentioned that he was like a custodian.
Yeah.
On the
right.
on the Super Death Star or whatever.
It's supposed to be funny.
Who would, yeah, and it sort of is, but then you'd think, who would actually waste time with a soldier being a custodian on this thing?
Yeah.
Somebody they're trying to breed as an ultimate.
My thing is, the problem I have with the new cast is we don't get into their past. For Rey, it's fine. That's going to be addressed in the later one. For Kylo Ren or Ben Solo, it doesn't work because then when Han dies, we don't have that connection between the two of them. So it's not impactful like it should have been. It should have been an emotionally charged thing where people shared tears over it. And the only people that shared tears on it, I feel, was because it was Han Solo, not because of the action itself, not because of the connection between them. And when it comes to Finn's character, he's supposed to change, and we're supposed to buy in that he changes, but we get no history of what led to this point. Purely that apparently he was supposed to do this, he was raised to do this, and for some reason he ain't doing this. And there's nothing there to try to tie them together. And you can excuse it by being like, oh, well, in the next movie that's going to be addressed. No, that doesn't work. This has to fit on its own. It has to be a standalone Star Wars movie, and it's not. It doesn't do any of that type of wrapping up. We don't have enough history into these characters at all. These characters don't work from that angle because of the way they're shown to us. The only one that I can see works is Rey, and that's because they deliberately tried to set up it being kind of a mystery thing and imply that it's going to be in the next one. Not where you have to assume.
Not to mention that my thing about Finn is that, again, he doesn't really feel like he fits with like the Star Wars universe. The way that he talks and the way that he goes about things and stuff like that, it feels like if you were to take somebody, like just any person, and like just kind of throw them into this thing, that's exactly what he'd be like.
Yeah,
you know, especially when he uses dialogue options like "you got a boyfriend," like cute boyfriend, you know, and when he has Captain, what's her name?
Phasma.
Underutilized
character.
Yeah, and he's like, you know, he's more or less like, I got you, I got all the power now. What'd you think of that?
No,
you know,
I agree. Actually, some of the mannerisms for him don't fit, especially given that again he's supposed to be taken as a child and conditioned to do this stuff. You don't have that type of, ability to be able to communicate like that. You shouldn't be like that. I've never seen anybody that's been kind of brainwashed, which essentially is what they're supposed to have been, is like brainwashed to do this stuff. They don't, just the way he reacts is just I don't buy it. So I love the acting, I love the character, but the history doesn't make sense.
Right, it doesn't.
And
mesh with
that's where the problem is. Again, Kylo Ren, people were like, oh, he's so different from Vader. No, he's not. He's exactly Vader. He is Anakin. He is the Anakin Vader, except he didn't get, screwed up in episode 3. He's just there.
But he's a character that kind of throws these little
temper tantrums.
Yeah,
he's a whiny bitch too.
He stands there and he's like, "I got bad news. I'm gonna start hacking up this console."
Right.
For an absurd.
But there's a funny moment with that. But yeah, I agree.
And then he starts like, Rey escapes and he's like doing the same thing in his little interrogation chamber. And he's really, I don't know, I feel like he's really hard for me to buy as much of a villain when he's kind of having this ludicrous reactions. And the thing is...
Yeah, as a character, I think he works well enough because I've always been intrigued by that character, even if it's a repeat. But as a villain, he doesn't really work for me in the sense, because they don't even make him seem powerful. They kind of take that away. They take away the presence that he has of being powerful. Darth Maul shows up in episode 1, and you're like, oh, he's a badass. Before we see him fight, you're like, he's a badass. Just the presence he showcases. Count Dooku shows up, and we're like, okay, he can fight. We know he can fight. He's got to be able to fight. His presence. Darth Vader shows up, and we're like, whoa, he's intimidating.
And the thing
and we don't even know much about Vader at first.
Kylo Ren actually seems at first like he is badass. Even though this technically breaks like Star Wars lore in both these situations, but he does stop the blaster bolt midair and just kind of hold it.
All right. Well, again though, it just kind of disappears at some point. I'm like, what the hell happened to it?
And and the thing is, he also, like, he forcefully invades people's minds to take information they otherwise wouldn't have given.
Yeah.
Now, both of those are again, they technically break lore because that's never happened before, and the Force Persuade, is a lot more
I don't know
difficult
that
to
really.
pull off,
I don't know that really breaks it as much as it's there.
Well,
because breaking it would imply that it's not able to happen, and we haven't seen that it's not able to happen. We've never been told it's not able to happen.
Well, the thing is,
it's the same thing with Vader showing up and first using the Force choke.
Well, and
obviously,
the thing is,
it can happen.
In Clone Wars, though, they talked about, like, Force. You already knew from even Episode 4, like, Force Persuade only works on the weak-minded.
Right.
And they said that if somebody's not weak-minded, it takes a lot more of it to overcome it. But you could break somebody's mind doing this. So even Anakin, who's the most powerful Jedi at the time, requires help to do this.
But you just said Clone Wars. Up until that point, we only knew that it worked on the weak-minded, and that was it. So that's what I'm saying. You can add to it. I'm fine with you adding to it, as long as it makes sense. Rey being able to tap into the Force out of nowhere and do stuff that she has no real knowledge of how to do, as far as anything we've seen, and as far as anything she's showcased. And it's like, oh, well, she's calling back on some training that we're going to see that she actually had as a kid. No, that doesn't work, because from the narrative perspective, if she realizes something like that, we as the audience have to realize something like that to connect us to her. And that doesn't happen. She just does it. So don't give me that, because we see into her past. We see the glimpses or whatever. That's what we know she knows. Nothing else. You can't just bring it up like that. I don't like that. I don't agree with that. Oh, and the whole notion of, well, history has a way of repeating itself, which is one of the guys from the Schmoes said, Christian. He said that on Collider. That was his defense. Bull. Because, frankly, when history does repeat itself, we mock it. Because we're like, well, why could it repeat itself? That's stupid. That's stupid that it would it happen like that again. And this is a story within a movie universe. You can change things. They went such a safe route, and people are buying this safe route and saying, well, this movie's brilliant. This movie is not brilliant. I think this movie is good. But the potential it had and what it ended up being for me is worlds apart. Because, even going, like, they went back to practical, right? Had practical in it. They had CG in it. But they did all this showcasing of saying, well, we have practical. There's practical stuff in there that's practical for the sake of being practical and nothing else, because it lends nothing to the scene.
And it looks really bad, actually.
And some of it looks really bad. There's CG that sometimes looks really bad. I talked about this in the other review. There's a scene on a spaceship with these pirates or whatever that come in, and there's these creatures there, and they're the Men in Black creatures, because it's the CG. That's what it looks like. It looks like it's from Men in Black.
Right.
It straight up looks like that. Every character, for the most part, every character in this movie has some sense of comedic timing to their conversations and everything. I don't like that. That harkens back to Star Trek, which I understand JJ's responsible for both. And when he did Star Trek, he actually wanted to do Star Wars. But the original trilogy didn't have that with everyone. And when it did have it, it was used appropriately, not overly done. Now, I think a lot of humor works. So I want to say that. I think most of the humor works. But there's still too much. And there's sometimes where it just doesn't fit. At the very beginning, you're opening up. You're having this village be destroyed. This character dies, who's connected to Poe Dameron, right? Who we're supposed to be rooting for. And Poe's brought over in front of Kylo Ren. And they're standing there, like, he's kneeling. Kylo's standing there. And he's like, are you going to talk? Are you going to say something? Or am I supposed to say something? And it's supposed to be funny. And a lot of people find it funny. But I think you shift tone so quick on that. And why would he react that way? He just watched the person that we're supposed to think he cares about die. All these people getting murdered and then rounded up. and his reaction is to joke. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And there's plot conveniences in this movie for the sake of being a plot convenience, like when R2 wakes up, or what, it just kind of happens. It's just there.
Or people just kind of happening to show up at the exact time that you need them, like Han and Chewie showing up at that time, or the old lady that shows up and happens to have like the old lightsaber that
right,
Luke
which
Anakin used.
They're like, oh, well, we'll address that at another time of how it got to her. Cop out.
Yeah, and I want to say like the thing about this, well, there's two things I want to bring up real quick regarding the two forces that are at work here.
Yeah.
Just about the people that are on screen. Captain Phasma, is that how you said it?
Yes. Boba Fett.
Yeah. She goes through the same thing about, kind of probably being indoctrinated into this military order for a long time. She's now she's actually a ranked officer, and they only threaten her life, and she takes down the shields that protect that base, and it's like completely.
Yeah, she does nothing.
Yeah.
She's so useless.
Yeah, there's that. And then there's the fact that the Resistance seems like they waltz in and they kick ass. You know, like when they showed up on whatever that forest world is, that's kind of a copy of Yavin and Endor.
It is Yavin.
It's like they just kind of waltz in, they start shooting up the place, they like shoot up the fighters, they shoot up the people on the ground and stuff like that. And I can get that they got the jump on them a little bit. But on the other hand, though, you would have figured that the First Order would have had enough soldiers there that they would have put up an adequate fight before they had to retreat and pull back. And then you got this Starkiller base, which is much larger than the Death Star. Obviously, it can't move anywhere because it's a planet. It's not actually like a space station this time or whatever. And they don't have adequate air defense protecting a stationary thing that could quite literally just win any conflict with them. Because if it can shoot 5 planets from a super vast range or whatever, and it has so many soldiers.
Overdone. I thought that was overdone.
Yeah, yes, it very much was. But even if we kind of buy into that, it's like, why don't you have a fleet or something protecting this place?
Right.
Because it's not like the Death Star where they could probably shoot capital ships out of orbit. I mean, given the range of this gun, it probably can't do that. So
no. And the thing too is the whole Resistance. You have the Resistance, you have the First Order, which doesn't make any sense for a title. And then you actually have the New Republic. The New Republic is funding the Resistance. Yet somehow they're not the same. That doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense.
The thing that, needs to be remembered is that the New Republic is what those rebels became from the original trilogy. The First Order is apparently the remnants of the old Empire, which, again, as we pointed out, that doesn't really make sense, why they're called the First Order or all that kind of stuff. When you start asking the questions, it doesn't really add up. But if you got into it, it's like, why aren't the two of them fighting? Like the New Republic versus the First Order. Instead, you have this Resistance getting played into that thing. So it feels like the Resistance is simply an excuse to call them rebels.
Yeah.
And say it's still rebels fighting against the evil overlords or what have you, and that doesn't really make any sense at all. And of course, what the Republic's even actually doing for these guys is kind of vague, because you got General Leia that's supposed to be doing stuff, but she ain't doing nothing.
She's just there. And Mark Hamill is just there as Luke, just there. This movie promoted itself showcasing the original 3, and yet I feel like didn't really utilize 2 of the 3. And then gave the third one a death that wasn't fitting, because they literally had Han die, again, without the real build up to it. But we could see it coming a mile away, because again, this is A New Hope. Then he dies. But they don't really show, after he dies, they don't show the emotional toll it would have taken on Leia, on Chewie. We get the initial reaction of Chewie. We don't get anything after that. We don't get a funeral. We get nothing. It's just like, well, up to, let's go back. Oh, R2 conveniently woke up. Yeah, let's go find Luke. It's like, wow.
And
Okay.
and the things about that scene is, for one, you know that Kylo Ren obviously has issues with his father.
Yeah.
Because when he references that Rey sees him as a father figure, which
Right.
doesn't make any sense in the plot, it's like, well, you would have been disappointed.
Right.
You know, and they have that kind of thing, but you don't get any, like,
Right.
talk between them about that past. It's just like, well, your new emperor, and he's Neo Palpatine. Let's be honest, he's Neo Palpatine.
Yeah.
It's like, well, he's just tricking you, he's just using you, but you don't get anything that kind of, any suggestion at all as to what created this rift between them.
Right.
And the thing is, his death is supposed to be the same thing for Rey that it is for that Obi-Wan's was for Luke.
Yeah.
But Luke actually knew Obi-Wan before the events of the fourth movie. Because when he says
he
I'm
references
looking for
him.
Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's like, I wonder if he means old Ben.
Yeah.
I don't know how he made this jump,
But I mean,
but at least you get,
I don't know.
and
that
it
I
is
go there.
ambiguous, but you do know that he actually did know Obi-Wan in
He
some
knew
form
of
or fashion.
him, but that doesn't mean anything.
So
That's not really my thing.
I don't like it because I felt like they just kind
even-
of forced that in.
I mean, even in A New Hope, I had that problem where it's like Obi-Wan died, but we get the initial reaction of no, and we get him kind of pouting, but that's really all we get. So even in A New Hope, I had that problem. But here's the thing: A New Hope was when?
Yeah.
When did that come out? 77. Yeah, this movie's had. And people are like, oh, well, you got to forgive JJ because he had to bring all this stuff together and he was under a time crunch. This movie got pushed back. This movie was actually supposed to come out in May and got pushed back into December. So don't give me that. And for having a time crunch, JJ just chose to rehash everything. It's like nostalgia will fuel people's love for this movie. And he was right. Now, I have seen some people complain about this movie. Actually, I've seen a few more complaints, but mostly everything I've seen from Jeremy Johns, Chris Stuckman, Schmoes, Collider, all of it has ratings that I can't begin to agree with, because that lack of originality, that lack of creativity with the plot, really drives this movie down. Now, we've said a lot of bad, right? There could be probably more bad. I'm not gonna lie, it probably is. But
that
I think
could be even more lengthy than this is.
I think we've already gone on a long time. I want to discuss what I like, because you really don't like anything. No, I mean you might like a little, but I want to.
I like pieces here
I want
and
to
there,
discuss
but
what I
I
like.
think overall, though, I don't like how these. I don't like how this plot and these characters are supposed to relate to each other. I don't care for anything because I feel like it's just a mess where they're concerned.
For me, about 80 to 90% of the humor works. I think it's overdone. I think they should have cut some of it out, kind of dispersed it a little bit to different characters, but I think the majority of it does work. The action scenes are not emotionally engaging as much as they could have been. And the action scenes are not, I don't buy into them from the plot standpoint for some of them, right? Which we've discussed. But as far as actually being action, I do like all the ship battle action scenes. I think those look really cool. I like Finn's action scene where he's fighting that stormtrooper who proves that just because you have a lightsaber don't mean you're going to win the fight, right?
Yeah.
So I like that. And I like Finn versus Kylo Ren because ultimately he loses like he should have lost. Like they both should have lost. So I like that. I may not like everything involved with the characters, but I think the acting was really good. Minus Carrie Fisher. I really like the acting.
Which, to be fair, it's like I don't think that Carrie Fisher was doing like
No.
bad acting per se. I feel like her acting just didn't do much for a character. She's just kind of there. So it's neither good nor bad. It's just very neutral and obviously neutral.
I don't think it was very good, but she was never very good, in my opinion. So, but I do think, I think visually most of the visual works. I think the acting works. I actually like a lot of the characters. Again, my biggest issues are the plot. Because I think the plot is just a mess. But I think acting-wise, I think, just the performances that are given to us, what they had to bring. I really buy Daisy Ridley's character as Rey. I really like her. I think she's a strong character. And
indeed, and I agree with that, and I concur with that. The acting's, even if the characters themselves don't make sense, the acting was actually pretty good on this. I don't care for this once again forced romance that's kind of going up between Rey and Finn.
Well, here's my argument to that, actually, because I do think the chemistry's there. But they kind of did the same thing again as A New Hope, where it's like, no, they're getting along. There's a smooch that's not on the lips that happens. And in the end, she says friend, and she leaves. And even in A New Hope, you see Luke, and he kind of, he wants that booty.
Okay, let's get back.
No, but for real.
I mean, I would actually like it if they state with the fact that it's like, we're not going to be a couple, we're just going to be friends.
Yeah, but that's not really.
Yeah, but I know
just from a basic story narrative, that's not really going to happen. But they could be. I mean, technically, it doesn't resolve itself to where they obviously get together. So I kind of like that because it's a slower build. And what I was trying to say is the thing with Luke is that he sees Leia, he thinks she's beautiful and everything. He has comments with Han about her and whether she'd be interested. He goes to save her. They're leaving, they're kind of getting along. She comforts him a little bit after Obi-Wan dies. There's like small moments in there, but they don't actually end up together in that movie. And for obvious reasons now, but just as the movie, they don't end up together. So that doesn't happen. And this kind of happens the same way here. And this is one of the times where I like that. I like that similarity. Because it's like, okay, they could have just done the typical movie thing, guy and girl hook up, because they can, because they're the main characters. Right away at the end of the movie, they're just going to come together. And they establish that there's a connection between them. They establish that they're definitely, buddy at the very least. And that there could be potential for more, but it doesn't actually showcase that there for sure is more. He wants more, but you don't get that same type of feeling from her. So it has a chance to grow in either direction. And I do actually like that because they could have just gone the route of them being together.
I don't know. I kind of feel like this is once again one of these women kind of liking guys that are obsessive, because I could easily argue it's like, well, that kind of happens in the prequels with Anakin and Padme. And it's like he's kind of obsessive about this, and in the original trilogy is between Leia and Han. I felt like Han just kind of kept trying to push this onto Leia,
Yeah, okay.
And that more or less happens. And you could argue that there are other things to build up on their chemistry and stuff like that. And I'm not necessarily saying that. But I'm saying that if you look at that, and then you look at the original trilogy, and then you look at what's happening here, Finn is a character that, for me, is kind of full of it, and he's heavily obsessive about Rey.
No, absolutely not. He makes a comment about whether she has a boyfriend and what have you, and then he chooses to he says, "Come with me" at one point, but he chooses to leave. He was leaving. It wasn't if the as I almost said Empire. If the First Order hadn't have attacked, and he hadn't have seen, realized that Rey was in trouble and seen her get taken away, and then said, "Well, I'm gonna go save her." If he hadn't have made that decision, like if all that had to happen in order for him to pursue her, again, and this time to save her, because he was leaving. He was done. He said, stay safe, basically.
But see, I would counter argue with that because obviously, there's even from the get go, he's obviously attracted to her, and
well, she's pretty, come on,
and stuff like that, and he keeps making these, like he makes that comment and stuff like that, and then he's like getting the droid to help lie for him and shit to impress her.
Okay, no.
And he says later, he's like, well, I did this stuff because you looked at me in a way that nobody else had. And she had done this because he put off the lie that he was, with the resistance. And then, of course, he's going to leave because he's like, this isn't my problem. But he does ask her to, like, come with him. And then he goes back because she's in danger. And then when it comes to the whole Star Killer base and stuff like that, he actually gives the resistance and stuff bogus information because he's like, oh, well, I kind of made that stuff up. I just wanted an excuse to be able to come here and rescue Rey. And, Han's like, well, there are people that are depending on us. People are going to, like, die over this or whatever. But that aspect of it didn't actually bother him. He was just... And I won't say it didn't bother him at all. I'm saying that wasn't, like, really a concern of his at the time. No, he was concerned with Rey.
But that just goes to that wasn't the priority. Just like their priority wasn't Rey. Their priority was the mission. Him having had this connection to Rey, and Rey, from what we've seen, being the only character that he's had a connection to, was his reasoning. So... I disagree. I absolutely disagree with you on this. I've seen people who act obsessive in movies, and this was not that. This was him. You understand why he likes her, not just from she's a pretty person kind of aspect of it, but because when he did lie, and he did that to cover himself because, who would blame him if he said, I'm a stormtrooper? You'd get a different reaction. But her reaction to him is not, given his background, he's never had that kind of reaction. He's never been treated that way. He's never been shown that kind of thing. And she treated him in a way that, again, he'd never experienced. So there's a point where he's obviously romantically interested and her, but it's more than that. There's more to it than that because he's come from a background to where he hasn't been shown any of this stuff, or at least that's what we're led to believe. He's not been exposed to any of this stuff.
I don't actually buy much of his character, and it's like, and the fact is, she never really like calls him out, even if it's just to say, "Wait a minute, you kind of lied to me." That never really happens, It just kind of
fine
gets
with that too.
over.
I've seen so much of that crap, and
I don't want an overblown reaction. I want a reasonable statement to be like, "You lied," and it's as simple as that. And the thing is, like, even the droid overlooks this fact. The droid only stopped like beating on him with Rey because because the both of them got the jump on this guy, and he was like, well, I'm resistance. And then later on, he's like, oh, no, I'm not actually resistance, but I need you to cover for me.
The droid stopped because when he was talking about Poe Dameron and everything and how he got the jacket, that's why the droid was with him, because the droid bought into that story that made sense. And of course, later on,
but that's kind of
anyway.
ambiguous now. If it's like, well, I told you this thing, but I lied about that. But what
Plus,
else could I have lied about?
It's not like Finn seemed like a bad character in any real sense. I mean, yeah, he was lying, but he was explaining why he lied to the droid. So then it was kind of to BB-8. So it was kind of up there. Which, by the way, aside from Rey, BB-8 is like my favorite character in this movie.
He is quite humorous, and I like what body language he can get for being a droid with a round orb of a body. Mm-hmm. I will admit to liking that.
And again, I said this and I think I said this in the other one. The music doesn't stand out. I think it's fine, so it's not really a negative. It's just doesn't stand out. There's just no song that stands out to me about it. And I think the lightsaber action sequences, people were like, oh, well, it's not the prequels because it's more like the originals because it's more showcasing emotion than it is technique or whatever. Again, I don't like that comparison because the whole thing about the prequels is they're Jedi. They were trained to do it. So it makes sense that Rey shouldn't have technique because she's not trained. It makes sense that Finn shouldn't have technique because he's not trained. It doesn't make sense that Kylo wouldn't have technique because he is trained.
Right.
So that's where the problem comes. And you want to tell me that apparently you can't have it both ways? You can't showcase emotion and everything in a fight and have choreography? Because I'm pretty sure the Raid, which gets brought up a lot, Raid 2, has both.
Mm-hmm.
So don't lie to me like that. Don't give me that. That's excuse. And there's, as much as I thought the action was fine, there's nothing that stands out in this movie overall for me. There's the only moment I can think of is, again, BB-8 giving the thumbs up.
Right.
And that's not the kind of moment you want to stand out. I mean, in episode 1, it was Darth Maul.
Yeah.
In episode 2, for me anyway, it was the Jango Obi-Wan fight. Or Yoda. It
I actually
technically
like
two
that
moments.
fight.
So, in episode 3, it was Order 66. And it was the fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan and then the Emperor and Yoda. In episode 4, as much as I do not like the movie as much, the trench run at the end stood out to me. And I think in some ways the stormtrooper bit where they're dressed up, Episode 5, obviously it's No, I Am Your Father. It's that entire ending battle and that reveal. In episode 6, it's the final confrontation with Vader and then the Emperor. So there's always these moments. And in this one, I'm like, it's BB-8 giving the thumbs up.
Yeah.
That's not good. That's not good to me.
It's a little lackluster.
And I realize we went back into negative. I want to go and address one little negative real quick. That there's times where they take too long. Kylo Ren using that kind of force thing on Rey, right? Trying to read into her mind. Took too long. Too long of a shot. The end with Mark Hamill as Luke, and he turns around and he sees Rey, and they're just staring at each other, and it's like stare. Oh no, stare, 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 stare.
Like
Lightsaber,
switching perspectives,
stare.
yeah.
And it's just like, how long is this gonna go? And no one says anything. I'm like, okay, that could have been effective if you had cut that down. Just like
To like just the reveal.
15 seconds,
yeah.
20 seconds. Like, it didn't need to be that long. But again, I think the comedy mostly works. I think the action mostly works. I don't think there's anything that stands out. But I think as action on its own, it does work. I think the character performances are really good. The acting's really good overall. I think the music's fine. I think there's some really cool characters here. There's some things that I acknowledge I'm not going to really harp on, like Rey and her past, because I know that'll be revealed in the second one. So I am giving it a pass in that sense. But then there's also stuff that I think should have been addressed in this one. And you can't go on the basis of all of this is going to be explained. But I do like that Kylo Ren's character lived. I like that he lived. I like that because I wanted Darth Maul to just live and be in the second movie. Right?
Right.
And Vader's a continual thing. So I like that he lived. I like that they acknowledged that his training wasn't complete, so hopefully he'll get stronger. And I think the next one, it kind of sets up the next one for being the training of Rey and the training of Kylo.
Right, they're parallels of each other. Or at least that's what's implied. But, again, though, Kylo Ren should have been a lot stronger by this point. So if he's like this weak when he's actually got training, then how strong will Rey become? Something I want to point out, and this is something that kind of happens from a technical standpoint on this movie, and is that some of these cuts are just kind of really weird to the movie.
Yeah.
And I can't list them all because I've only seen it once, and it's not like I've could not them up. But at some point, it feels like people kind of teleport. Like when you got this scene where
Right.
it's like Finn and Han and Chewie, and they look at Rey, and she's like across this chasm, like climbing up, and then the next shot is like Rey opening a door, and she's surprised because they're there.
Right.
You know, it's like they seem to like they teleported, or when or when Finn and Rey are leaving, and then Kylo Ren's suddenly in front of them somehow. It's kind of like, well, he seemed to have teleported. And you can't even use the fact about force movement because force movement, for some reason, seemed to have been cut out of this movie. Yeah, so
I do want to say I actually do like that Snoke showed up in this movie because the Emperor probably should have shown up earlier in the original. So I like that he's incorporated just glimpses in this one, and hopefully he'll have more of a presence in the second one because he is the looming threat. And I do like the fact that the stormtroopers seem more competent than what they were.
yeah,
Now, they do still get beat. It happens. They're the bad guys. But they do seem more competent. So I do like that. And you do get a present. You do get that feeling that they are a power. That they are intimidating. That they can do stuff. That people are afraid of them. Because they can do stuff.
It's amazing what a little bit of accuracy does for your presence.
Yeah, that's true. I like Poe Dameron's character. I think he wasn't in it very much, and I mean I like him as far as he doesn't have any real depth to him, but I like him as far as just being a kind of action piece. So someone to kind of push it along. So and hopefully they, incorporate more of him. But we've gone on for a long while, a lot longer than I wanted.
And trust me, there could have been more.
Yeah, I bet. You're the reason we went on so long.
And I'm proud of it.
That's probably not true. It probably was me, but I don't know. Anyway, so you go ahead and go first real quick. Just give us a couple minutes here. Go over everything. And then I guess reaffirm your rating, and then I'm gonna give mine.
Okay, and I feel like I am probably just restating everything here, but I do feel like action does look pretty cool in this thing. You do have like stormtroopers with accuracy and all that kind of stuff, and all that is great. But again, I feel like this thing suffers most heavily on its plot. The plot is just between being recycled and having a lot of mess that doesn't actually add up and kind of redefines lore that you already had. It just didn't work for me as well. Characters, their acting was great. The characters themselves, I largely didn't buy into, and I could go on a list for every character, but I did like Rey in a general sense. I didn't like how they played her into the plot though, and Poe was very good. He was kind of underutilized though, so he's largely just kind of neutral. So overall, I stand by my rating of 3. Not because I feel like this is a movie that I'm actually absolutely repulsed to see, but just because of how the plot played out and the fact that it's a recycled plot. I can't put this as being an average movie because it's part of this sequence. That's why I have to give it a lower rating of 3, because it's like, well, I don't like that they are so repetitive on this matter. But I think that if you're not bothered by that, you'll probably like this movie. I myself, though, wanted more out of it. I wanted more out of its characters and more out of its story.
Right. Okay, so for me, like I said, my biggest issue is the plot. It's got to be the plot. From the recycled use, from the convenience of some of the stuff happening, too convenient, from, characters and not really establishing the history of these characters, not setting up anything. The Han death could have been so much more impactful and meaningful. Because I actually I get a little misty-eyed at some of these movies when they do it well. This movie didn't do it well. It just happened. So when you have moments, you have missed opportunities like that. You have missed opportunities like Phasma. Or even Poe, who I liked, but didn't contribute anything. Or, Finn with not explaining his backstory, which should have been done in this movie, not in another movie. Should have been done in this movie. With the whole Death Star again. When you have that kind of thing, when you have illogical things like Rey being able to use the Force and use a lightsaber in a manner that only a Jedi should have been able to do with training, and Luke had to struggle for that, and Anakin had to build on that, and Jedi in general have to build on that, and you just threw that out the window. Sorry. This movie could have been amazing. It could have been my third favorite movie, and it's not happening. Now, the thing that saves this movie, I think, is the acting. Because aside from the problems I have with the plot, which are vast, I think the acting was overall great. I think the humor was overall great. I think the action of it was really good for the most part. And I want to see the continuation of this story, which is saying something. Because if it was completely bad, I wouldn't want to see that. I wouldn't want to see any progression. And I do want to see it. And I do hope that they fix some of this. But there are things that I really like about this. Like, I've always liked the idea of kind of the Anakin character and him being bad. And this took it, but we didn't get this change that we did, the jump that we did, where we had Anakin who's just complaining and power seeking and everything, and jump straight to Vader who is in control and all that. We have this character who's kind of growing into it, and hopefully will expand upon it. And I don't want him to be redeemed. I don't think he's redeemable. And I wish his reveal had just been there and not something where he's like, oh, that's Kylo Ren. Oh, no, it's not. Because that was very Star Trek Into Darkness, where they did with Khan, and I didn't like that. But I think you introduced some characters that I can follow, plot problems aside. So I think that's good. I think the new cast really stands out, and I was afraid they wouldn't. I would have liked the old cast to be incorporated more, but I think for what they did, for the most part, it kind of worked for me. And I'd rather have the focus on the new characters than on the old anyway, when you're doing that. So I definitely think there's aspects of this movie that really work well. There's just that plot really wears it down, and there's so many plot problems, not just the New Hope comparison, but just in general. There's so much. And I had to look at this, and I went to A New Hope to look at the rating, because I was like, I feel like this is almost on par with it in a way. Just because I didn't enjoy A New Hope as much. And I gave A New Hope a 5.3. And after really debating this over and really thinking about it, I'm going to go in and I'm going to give this movie a 5.3. I thought about giving it higher. I thought about giving it lower. And that's all because of the plot. And that plot really wore me out. It really took me out of it. And I've only seen the movie once. But I can't in good conscience go and give this movie higher than the movie that started everything, when this is just a rehash, like a reinterpretation of what happened then. I can't do it. But at the same time, there are elements to this that were done better. Like the acting. Like the action. So I can't give it less than that, because these things do stand out. So it has to be on par. Yeah, just from a creative aspect, I can't do it. I can't go any higher. If you can, cool for you. But as a Star Wars fan, just a fan of story, of good cinema, good storytelling, I can't do that. And I didn't have the same problems with it that you did. Not to that degree anyway, because obviously it went down really low for you. But this film could have been like a 7.5 and 8, somewhere up there. And this is how low it went, purely because one aspect of it. Whereas you had more problems with several different aspects of it, I literally had one major problem, and it took it down this far. And that's really disappointing to me. And I'm disappointed that people actually... I'm kind of disappointed that people rated it so high and ignored that or skimmed over that. Because if you liked it for emphasis on other stuff that they did well, that's fine. Like, to me, that's understandable, but I just don't get it. I don't get how you can have a rating like that and skim over the fact that it did this and be like, oh, well, it didn't bother me. Right. How could it not bother you? But I don't know. Anyway, guys, so yeah, that'll wrap this up. This was really long. I apologize if you stuck with us. Thank you. You are awesome. Really awesome. Go ahead and comment, though. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are there points that we didn't bring up? Because there could have been points that we didn't bring up. Throw one in really quick. They didn't use any of the alien creatures from the previous movies. I thought that was strange. Completely different. That for all their hearkening back to the old trilogy and everything, they didn't use any of the same characters at all. Any callbacks like that. Or any new ship designs or anything that were in the Return of the Jedi.
Maybe they thought they were being subtle.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, like I said, that'll wrap this up. Personally, I kind of like the prequels more in the sense that it expands on it. But go ahead and let me know in the comments what you thought overall of this movie. Are there issues you had? Do you agree with us? Do you disagree? Maybe you didn't have the same issues we did, or maybe you just didn't have any issues at all. Go ahead and let me know why, because I'm really curious to see what the reasoning is, why people are rating it so high. I just can't do it personally, but that's me, and obviously I did higher than you, so it's just how it works, I guess.
Yep.
But anyway, hopefully the next one's better. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and until next time, peace.